Good day, Miss Maisara. I am Inora Victoria from Tutorial 5 and Group 6. So today, me and my group will be presenting our group assignment topic on the company Lehman Brothers Holding. So to begin with, I will be presenting the introduction and also the conclusion. So for the introduction, Lehman Brothers Holding, what are the nature of the business? So basically the nature of this business is to act as a global investment bank. So what does a global investment bank does, especially for Lehman Brothers Holding? They help individuals and organizations to raise capitals and to provide financial consultancy services. Secondly, they guide businesses and governments to meet their financial obligation in order to raise revenues and profit and also to maintain a good reporting statement. So secondly, does Lehman Brothers Holding still exist? The answer is no. Basically, they were filed for bankruptcy in the year 2008, which is on September 15. So this was the largest bankruptcy in the history of US. So now I'll be presenting on the brief background of the company, where Lehman Brothers begins back in the 19th century, and they started off as a general stock commodities where they act as a broker who provide financial assistance to individuals and organizations. Eventually, over time, they became the fourth largest investment banking in US. So you'll be wondering who was the founder of Lehman Brothers Holding. So the founders of Lehman Brothers Holding are Lehman Brothers themselves, who consist of Henry, Emmanuel, and Mayer Lehman. These three brothers are the founders of Lehman Brothers Holding. So for the next few points, I'll be explaining the downfall of the company who eventually leads to bankruptcy in the year 2000. So in the early 2000s, Lehman Brothers was experiencing pressure from an unstable economic condition. Due to their pressure from investors, shareholders, supplier, and also creditor, they were pressurized to collapse if was no measure taken in the early 2000s. However, Sabre Peterson, who was the chief executive officer of Bell Howell Corporation, stepped in to guide the firm. He acquires investment banks like Abraham and Co. and Cohen and Loeb to merge together, where they eventually merged and formed as Lehman Brothers Cohen Loeb. So basically, with the incorporation of merging between this investment bank, it leads to the successful banking, which became the fourth largest investment bank in the history of the US. So that is all from my part. I'll pass to the next presenter.
Good afternoon, Miss. My name is Scott Waywan. I talk about the accounting scandal of Lehman Brothers. The scandal was begin with during the House Blaze, Lehman obtained a few contract money borrower, including Aurora Loan Services, an organization which professional in providing loans to people without full documentation. From the year 2005 to year 2007, commerce in these home loans increased the incomes and caused the presentation and development of Lehman to outperform that of its speculation banking firm partners. Now, notwithstanding, in the year 2007, property holders could not pay their home loans and the real estate market started to disintegrate. Investment banks like Lehman had to record billions of debt. The bad loans allocated a gigantic imprint on the balance sheet of this company. Simultaneously, the rating office started to focus on the financial leverage ratios and the accounting report of the venture banking organizations. Be that as it may, sadly as Lehman, the monstrous proportion of acquisition and the forceful development methodology that has been utilized by Lehman in 2006 had brought a great financial leverage ratios. An assessment of Lehman's condition by the rating officers would have uncovered high leverage level. The unhappy situation will cause Lehman's stock and share price decline and have a poor image to Lehman. This situation had caused Lehman either to sell off its asset or to raise up the capital. Lehman set out an elective method to support the accounting report and stock away its awful leverage and hardest situation from the eyes of the rating office and banks. This method was recognized as Repo 105. It's a repurchase agreement exchange have generally been utilized by organizations to deal with their short-term requirement for cash. However, for Lehman's situation, this exchange took on an uncommon twist that were intended to make Lehman's balance sheet seem to look more grounded than they really were. There are 7 steps in Report 105. First step, Lehman purchased bond from other banks by involving its Lehman Brothers Special Financing Unit in US. The Lehman Brothers Special Financing then moved the bond to London affiliation recognized as Lehman Brothers International. Then they gave asset for its counterparty and gotten money and report the asset at the start of the quarter at a greater price. The cash gotten was then to write off the gigantic figure of Lehman's liabilities. Step 5. The decrease in the liabilities display a better quarterly budget, and this quarterly budget will show to the public. With healthy financial report, Lehman went to the bank and loaning firms to obtain loan. A couple days after, Lehman rebought the bond from London affiliation at 105 of the upside of asset. The transaction basically happened for a period of 7 to 10 days prior of the completion of the quarter, and this transaction make a really realistic image of the company monetary condition. Lehman then would receive a short-term cash loan from its counterparty as a trade-off for its resource. Lehman would then record this transaction as an income, when truth to be told it was essential as a financial arrangement. However, Lehman does not obey the appropriate accounting rules and eliminated the paying asset from the books and recorded the transaction as a sale. The sale was utilized to pay down the liabilities, where Lehman will show a balance sheet with low leverage and less debt on a quarterly financial reporting date. Indeed, the bankruptcy officers examined that Lehman detailed a net leverage ratio of 15.4, but it ought to be 17.3 in the event that Lehman did not utilize the Repo 105. End of Lehman Brothers. Lehman Brothers was went bankruptcy on 15 September 2008. Many of its workers generally wearing matching suits left the bank's workplace individually with what engrossed their hands. It was a grave update that nothing is everlastingly, even in the richness of the investment and financial planet. Before Lehman went collapsed, Lehman was the fourth largest investment bank in the US with 2,500 workers around the planet. Lehman emerged into an image of abundance of the 2007 to 2008 financial crisis, and grew by the supreme meltdown that moved throughout the monetary business sector and caused an accepted of $10 trillion in lost financial result. That's all from me. I'll pass to the next presenter.
I am Teresa Chen, and now I would like to explain about how the parties involved become related according to MARS 124. MARS 124 is to ensure that an entity financial statement contains the necessary disclosure on its financial position may have been affected by the existence of related parties and by the transaction and outstanding balance with such party. Lehman Brothers Incorporated LBI was a registered broker-dealer and separate wholly owned U.S. subsidiary of Lehman Brothers Holdings Incorporated (LBHI). LBI was parent to Lehman Brothers Special Financing Incorporated (LBSF), and the Lehman Brothers International Europe (LBIE) was Lehman European broker-dealer, and LBHI was ultimate parent to this subsidiary company. The complex corporate structure of Lehman was created to provide their business with regulatory and economically to limit the risks and liabilities. They operated their business and services such as finance, risk compliance, legal regulatory, and human resources on a joint basis. Since they are related party, LBI was party to numerous other intercompany transactions with various Lehman affiliates, and it clearing the U.S. trades and transacted non-U.S. trade through its broker-dealer in other countries. Besides, LBI held the security for other Lehman's entity, and the assets of LBI were held by other Lehman affiliates. The parent company of LBI used the repo and caused the negative impacts to LBI and its subsidiary. The unsecured financing of LBI became restricted and customers lost confidence on them. LBHI had caused the negative impacts such as failed to finance on unsecured condition or even secure basis. The client withdrew from the business, increase in failed transaction, and the demands of affiliates and subsidiary by clearing banks increased. To prevent the low rating from rate agency, Lehman used Repo 105 to show up its balance sheet and hide the poor condition from the eyes of rating agency, investor, creditors, regulators, and other financial statement users and monitors. Next, I would like to explain about how the MFRS 124 should be recognized and reported in the financial statement. The relationship between the parents and subsidiaries shall be declared whether or not there have been transactions between the associated parties. The name of the entity's parents, and if different, the ultimate controlling party must be disclosed. If neither the entity's parent nor the ultimate controlling party produce financial statement available for public use, the identities of the entity's next most senior parent also must be published. For example, Lehman was a multi-tier corporate with 8,000 legal companies in 40 countries. Most customers undertook business with Lehman without knowing exactly which subsidiary that were conducting the business. So we must know the relationship between the related parties. Next, if there have been transactions between the related parties, the information concerning transaction, outstanding balance, their terms and conditions, including whether they are secure and the nature of the consideration to be provided, settlement, and the provision for doubtful debts related to the amount of outstanding balance and the expenses recognized during the period in respect of bad or doubtful debts due from the related party also must be disclosed. For instance, the Lehman Brothers wanted their financial statement to look healthy. They did not use the right accounting system to report the Report 105, which is also known as repurchase agreement. Hence, failed to disclose the correct transaction to public. They should perform the regular portfolio reconciliation with all other counterparties in order to ensure the margin requirements are based on the correct set of position and balance. Last is the short term of employee benefits, such as wages, salaries, pay annual leave and pay sick leave, profit sharing and bonuses and non-monetary benefits also must be disclosed. The pros employee benefits such as retirement benefits and medical care, long-term benefit like long service leave and share-based payments of the key management personnel shall be disclosed too. For example, Lehman was caught in the web of executive conflicts of interest culminating into the payment of excessive bonus to directors before the failure of the firm. The unethical action of the Lehman's executive increased their bonuses significantly before the bankruptcy, and the director, Richard Fowle, made himself on the highly paid CEO in the US by paying $300 million within 8 years. That's all for my part.
Question 3b. Does related party disclosure are necessary for representing true picture of the entity to the users of financial statement? Justified. Before answering this question, let us take a look what is the purpose of the disclosure of the related parties. One of the purpose of disclosing the related parties is actually to show the users of financial statement that the financial and also operating policies that hold by a company might be affected by the relationship of the related parties, no matter through the presence of control, for example, subsidiaries and their parent company, and also joint control, which is a sharing of control between few parties and significant influence. On the other hand, the disclosure of the related parties is also to bring the attention of the users of financial statement to the likelihood that the existence of the related parties may affect the true picture of the financial statement, no matter through the transaction and also the outstanding balances due to or from the related parties. Through the disclosure of the related parties, the users of financial statement were able to get to know about the nature of the relationship, whereby what kind of relationship that they have with the related parties, such as parent and subsidiaries, manager, director, and also shareholder. And they will also get to know about the description of the transaction, no matter the large amount transaction to the nominal amount transaction, even the zero amount transaction. Other than that, they will also get to know about the amount of transaction in the reporting period and if there are any changes in the method of establishing the terms in their transaction. And last but not least will be the amount due to or from the related parties. Finally, how all this will be able to help the user to get to know the true picture of that financial statement. After having all this information, user will be able to make a better assessment on the effect of the related parties' relationship to that company. On the other hand, they will also be able to evaluate the significance of the transaction between the related parties with that company. Other than that, they will also able to make an assessment on what are the risks and opportunities that might face by that company in the future. And last but not least, they will also able to make an educational decision, no matter for their investment and also market analysis. So, after all this, we get to know that the disclosure of the related parties is actually can represent the true picture of the financial statement to the users. So, that's all from me, and next I'll pass it to the next presenter.
Good day, Miss. My name is Li Pui. I would like to present the weaknesses of investor protection mechanism and the suggestion to better protect the investor. The first weaknesses in the mechanism is the imperfection of regulatory framework, which allow the risk of abusive related party transaction. Some of the listing rules did not include the requirement to have independent director to approve the related party transaction over a particular level, which is considered materiality. Besides, some of the listing rules do not need shareholders' approval. The investors are only notified after the board has given its approval. In the case of listing rules in Hong Kong, the transaction dealing with related party transaction require the disclosure, directors' approval, third-party review, and additional steps of shareholders voting if the transaction is large amount. The listing regulation is ideal, but lack of statutory backing and the penalty of the violation of rules is light. To solve the weaknesses, the regulatory framework should mandatorily allow and encourage the shareholders to participate in the approval of related party transaction. Such approval procedure operates successfully only if there is a few exception in the legislation and make sure each of the transaction will go through the approval process. The related party should avoid to taking part in the approval process, so that to reduce the risk of approving the transaction with related party out of the ordinary course. Next, it is recommended accounting standard to clearly define the materiality and set the threshold for the approval procedure, as the materiality is only the professional judgment from the auditor. This could help the board and the shareholders to assess the related party transaction effectively. Other than that, the listing regulation should be backed by law as to make the company liable to the legal suit when they breach the rules. The corresponding civil fines and the compensation of loss to investor could make the companies alert and always responsible to take care of the investor interest. The second weakness is focused on the independence issue of independent non-executive directors, as known as INED. Most business having the INED on the board of directors to oversight the management team and avoid the abusive related party transaction, but the independence issue is arise. It is because INED is appointed through the voting of shareholders. Usually the majority shareholders is the owner of the company, who could directly affect the voting result. So the voting mechanism is biased, which means that the owners can appoint everyone to be the INED in the board, so that the INED could be the puppet of him. Besides, there is no restriction on the period of INED could serve on the board. The friendship between INED and the members of the management team is built, and the independence of INED could be affected. To better protect the investor from abusive related party transaction, the board is suggested to include more independent directors. It would be better to include outsiders as the independent director, such as the government officer, judicial officer, who possess the independence in mind and appearance. The listing rules should also set the requirement that independent directors should make up at least half of the board to ensure the independence is existed and balance the power of executive directors and non-executive directors, so that none of the group could dominate the fair decision is made. Companies should also consider to setting up a related party transaction committee to oversight and report the findings of related party transactions to investors from time to time. In addition, shorten the time frame of the director can serve the board as to ensure the independence of a director is maintained. The last focus is failure to recognize and report all related party transactions due to poor internal control and corporate governance system. It is too difficult to discover every related party transactions, especially the company is dealing with many small and private enterprise. Therefore, the transaction records are not detailed and usually aggregated become a large amount. When the company trade partners is headquartered in another country, the issue becomes more complicated. It can be overcome by a good quality of internal control, which is recording and documenting all the related party transactions out of the business process. The internal auditor team should also periodically review the records and documents for the unidentified related party transaction. The company should also need to establish a statement of policy on related party transactions and formalize the review process to increase the transparency of the transaction details. Lastly, the company should also enforce the conduct of corporate governance code by disclosing all the controlling procedure dealing with related party transactions in the CG report to the public. That's all for me. Thank you.
So now I'll be presenting the conclusion part. So based on the context of the group assignment, we could conclude that what are the advantages or the benefits of disclosing related parties? Firstly, it is convenient to users of company financial statements, such users like shareholders, investors, suppliers, and also creditor. So next, the advantage or the benefit of disclosing these related parties are and a company able to compare the same information for other relating business. And lastly, this relating parties is beneficial as a company gets to highlight any possibility of material misstatement or error in the financial statement, which helps the company to provide a better and a secure financial statement. Next, what we have learned from this assignment. Based on my group on our case study on Lehman Brothers Holding, firstly, we have learned that a company should be able to express a clear and understandable reasoning for their key decision making. This is because, based on the case study of Lehman Brothers Holding, a failure from the government for a clear explanation in their financial obligation, the silence was misinterpreted by the investor and eventually it has led to the bankruptcy of the company. Second, a company should buy time or to take a greater decision to avoid uncertainties. And also based on our case study, the one of the main reason of Lehman bankruptcy is because they are insufficient of cash obligation to meet the short-term operating needs. And lastly, we also learned that trust in a company is very important, especially to the members, where each members should have trust and also the management trust their members who rely on their expertise in order to focus on the bigger problem or bigger scope in the business in order to avoid any uncertainty for the future obligation of the company. So that is all from me and my group. Thank you.